It is said that homelessness is on the verge of disappearing in Louisiana these days. With cheap housing prices, a stable real estate market, and more people successfully securing high-paying jobs, it seems that by the final months of 2025, no one will be living or struggling on the streets. But let's take a closer look at the living conditions in one of Louisiana's biggest cities and assess whether the long-standing crisis is really coming to an end.
With no place to go, no place to put your clothes, and no place to shower, and really not the opportunity that the Henry Robinson presents, a place to shower and a kind of a cozy type of a living situation. And it's not always alone in the room. You have a roommate,
Right.
but it's better than sleeping on the streets, and it gives me the opportunity to look into other share rentals and everything with other roommates. After the 6 months are over, I'm looking right now
You're trying to find
for
another.
a senior citizen apartment or housing place that doesn't have a long waiting list.
Every place probably has a waiting list.
Yeah.
It's sad. But
If anybody knows of something that doesn't have a long waiting list, they can just send my mail.
Came down here for a job. Job didn't work out. I resigned the position. I didn't get fired. And I thought I could pick up another job real quick. That didn't happen. That was 2 years ago. I'm a professional. I have degrees. Just no work down here in my profession. And I ended up on the streets going to the New Orleans mission right over here. And that was fine. They let you in the front door. You know, you just knock on the door and say, do you have a bed? And they'd say, okay, you got a bed. Now, if you want to go into the mission, it's $5 a night. And we're talking about people that don't have a job, don't have any way of really making money. Me personally, alcohol caught up with me, so I have a real hard time making money of any kind. But it's like, if you don't have $5 to go on the mission, then you sleep on the sidewalk. In New Orleans, if you sleep on the sidewalk or in a park or something like that, you go to jail. So there's no alternatives for people on the street. You either go to jail or you find some way to get $5 to get into the mission. And if you panhandle, if you ask people for money, you're still going to jail because that's against the law here.
New Orleans, the birthplace of American soul and resilience, is now grappling with a hard truth. How did it become one of the cruelest places to be poor in modern America? As rental prices skyrocket and mental health services collapse, more families are being pushed out onto the streets. Children, veterans, and the elderly now sleep just feet away from bars and music halls. It's not just a local issue. It's a snapshot of what homelessness in America truly means today. What happens when a city, famous for its celebration and spirit, can no longer protect its own? Current situation of homelessness in New Orleans. Have you ever walked through the historic streets of New Orleans and wondered why so many people sleep in tents beneath the bridges and beside streetlights? In early 2024, the metro area, including Jefferson Parish, counted over 1,400 individuals experiencing homelessness, a 5% increase from the year before, an alarming rise. While the number of unsheltered individuals fell by 12%, this shift doesn't mean the problem is improving. It simply means more people are moving into shelters, not homes. What's even more troubling is the 78% increase in homelessness among those aged 65 and older. In a city once known for resilience, How did we end up watching senior citizens sleep on sidewalks? Nearly 1 in 3 unhoused residents is over 55, with 120 people aged 65 plus and 300 between 55 to 64 recorded in early 2024. These aren't just statistics, they are real people, many of whom worked their entire lives only to be discarded in old age. Though New Orleans has seen some investment in shelters and outreach programs, the visible growth of street encampments tells a different story. From the French Quarter to beneath the I-10 bridges, the presence of tents and makeshift communities has become impossible to ignore. Still, these official counts may be underestimating the real scope. PIT, point-in-time counts, are limited to a single January night each year, and outreach workers admit they consistently miss people who hide in abandoned buildings or back alleys. Zooming out, the crisis in New Orleans mirrors a wider emergency unfolding across the country. In January 2024, the U.S. reported more than 770,000 people experiencing homelessness nationwide. That's the highest number since national records began. Within this staggering total, New Orleans stands as a painful snapshot of what it means to be homeless in America. Not just without shelter, but without a system that sees you, protects you, or offers a second chance. From my own perspective, New Orleans isn't just suffering from a housing shortage, it's suffering from a leadership vacuum. The city knows how to rally from Mardi Gras or rebuild after hurricanes, yet somehow it's paralyzed when it comes to helping its most vulnerable. I've walked past the same tents for months, sometimes years, and the silence around them is louder than the brass bands. If this is the best we can do in one of America's most iconic cities, what does that say about the rest of the country? This is not just a housing issue, it's a moral test. One that New Orleans and much of America is failing. How the housing crisis is driving homelessness in New Orleans. It's hard to discuss homelessness in New Orleans without confronting the city's deepening housing crisis. Over the past decade, housing costs have skyrocketed, leaving thousands of residents struggling to stay afloat. According to the data center of Southeast Louisiana, the median rent in New Orleans rose by more than 50% between 2011 and 2021, while wages largely stagnated. For low-income workers and retirees, this imbalance has made stable housing nearly impossible. One of the most significant issues is the lack of affordable rental units. A 2023 report by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition found that for every 100 extremely low-income renters in New Orleans, there are only 36 affordable and available units. That gap is devastating. It forces families to live on the edge, paying more than half their income in rent, and often leads to eviction when an emergency strikes, whether it's a hospital bill or a lost job. Additionally, gentrification has pushed longtime residents out of neighborhoods they once called home. Areas like the Bywater, Treme, and parts of Mid-City have been transformed into trendy destinations, driving up property values and rent. While some celebrate this revitalization, for others it means displacement, instability, and ultimately, homelessness. Another overlooked problem is the city's aging and hurricane-damaged housing stock. Many homes remain in disrepair after Katrina and Ida, and landlords often refuse to make necessary repairs while still demanding high rent. When the choice is between unsafe housing and the street, some residents are forced to sleep in their cars or under overpasses. What happens when a city doesn't protect its working class from being priced out? What happens when the dream of home ownership becomes a financial trap instead of a source of security? The answer is clear on the streets of New Orleans. The housing crisis didn't just cause homelessness, it guaranteed it. Without bold intervention and long-term investment in public housing and rental support, the cycle will continue. And New Orleans will remain a case study in how cities across the country are contributing to the rise of homelessness in America, one rent increase at a time. The housing crisis doesn't protect its working addiction, substance use, and mental health in the homeless population. When discussing homelessness in New Orleans, it is essential to look beyond the visible and consider the internal battles many individuals face, particularly those related to addiction and mental health. While these issues are not the cause of homelessness for everyone, they often make it significantly harder to escape. According to a 2023 report from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, approximately 30 to 40% of people experiencing homelessness in the U.S. live with a serious mental health condition, while more than 50% report some form of substance use disorder. In New Orleans, these figures are likely even higher due to the city's limited access to long-term behavioral health services and treatment programs. Over the past few years, the city has seen a noticeable rise in the use of synthetic drugs such as fentanyl and methamphetamine. These substances, often more potent and more accessible than traditional drugs, can affect judgment, relationships, and physical health. However, what is often overlooked is that many individuals turn to these substances not for escape, but for relief from anxiety, trauma, or untreated psychological conditions. Additionally, the pressure of life on the streets, constant movement, uncertainty, and lack of privacy can intensify stress and make recovery even more difficult. Without a stable environment or consistent access to care, even the most motivated individuals may find themselves stuck in a cycle. So, how can a person begin healing when they have no safe place to sleep or store medication? It's a question that continues to challenge outreach workers and healthcare professionals alike. Encouragingly, some local nonprofits are partnering with mobile clinics and drop-in centers to bring health support directly to the unhoused. Programs that combine mental health care with housing have shown promise. Yet, these efforts remain limited in scope, and funding is often uncertain. In the bigger picture, the intersection of addiction, mental health, and housing is a critical part of understanding homelessness in America. Addressing only one of these areas is rarely enough. Instead, long-term solutions must be holistic, combining stable shelter, supportive services, and dignity-driven care. The impact of COVID-19 on homelessness in New Orleans. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed vulnerabilities across every layer of society, but few groups were hit harder than those already living on the margins. In New Orleans, the virus didn't just strain hospitals and shutter businesses, it intensified the homelessness crisis in ways that are still unfolding. At the height of the pandemic, shelters faced a difficult choice: reduce capacity or risk becoming hotspots for transmission. Many reduced their beds by half or more to maintain distancing guidelines. This left hundreds with nowhere to go. Meanwhile, public facilities like libraries and community centers, often the only places where people without housing could access restrooms, the internet, or relief from the weather, were closed for months. Federal and local governments did respond with emergency measures. Hotel voucher programs were launched to offer temporary shelter, and eviction moratoriums helped slow the rate at which people became unhoused. Yet even with these efforts, many fell through the cracks. Individuals without formal leases, those staying with friends, or living in vehicles weren't always covered by protections. As a result, the number of people on the streets grew, particularly among families and younger adults. How do you shelter in place when you don't have a place to begin with? In a city already grappling with limited health infrastructure, the pandemic worsened access to basic care for people experiencing homelessness. Regular testing, mental health services, and treatment for chronic conditions became harder to reach. For some, the lack of ID or insurance created even more barriers. Though mobile clinics and pop-up outreach programs emerged to fill the gap, these were never meant to serve as long-term solutions. Despite the challenges, COVID-19 also sparked new conversations about equity and public health. It forced local leaders to acknowledge that homelessness is not just a housing issue, it's deeply connected to community well-being. In that sense, New Orleans became a microcosm of a larger truth about homelessness in America. When a crisis hits, the most vulnerable are the first to suffer and the last to recover. While vaccines, jobs, and services have returned for many, those without homes are still waiting for stability and for someone to remember their part of the recovery too. Tent sweeps and public space conflicts in New Orleans. As the number of unhoused residents grows in New Orleans, so too does the tension over where they can safely exist. In recent years, the city has increasingly turned to a controversial tactic known as tent sweeps, the forced removal of homeless encampments from public spaces. These sweeps are often justified by city officials as necessary for sanitation, public safety, or aesthetics. But the reality for those living in tents is far more complicated. Typically, these removals happen with little warning. City workers arrive with police, sanitation crews, and dump trucks. Personal belongings, including clothing, medications, and documents, are often discarded if not removed immediately. Though some outreach workers are present during sweeps to offer shelter referrals, the options are usually limited, and many people decline because of past trauma or strict shelter rules. Where are people expected to go when every corner they settle on gets cleared away? In theory, tent sweeps are meant to connect individuals with housing or services. But in practice, many say they feel more like displacement than assistance. In some cases, individuals return to the same spot days later, only to be removed again. This cycle drains city resources and creates instability, making it harder for outreach teams to build trust or track progress. Furthermore, the location of many of these sweeps, underneath highways, near tourist areas, or along public parks, raises difficult questions about whose comfort is prioritized. Are these actions about health and safety, or about hiding the problem from view? To be fair, cities like New Orleans do face challenges balancing public space with growing street populations. Yet critics argue that constant removal without offering sustainable housing is not a solution. It's a delay tactic. And while tent sweeps may temporarily clear sidewalks, they do nothing to address why people are sleeping there in the first place. Once again, this local policy reflects a larger national pattern. In city after city, similar sweeps are unfolding, exposing one of the deeper truths about homelessness in America. The problem isn't invisible. It's being ignored, moved, and criminalized. Government solutions and policy responses. As the homelessness crisis in New Orleans becomes harder to ignore, government officials at both the local and state levels have begun rolling out solutions. Yet, the effectiveness of these efforts remains a topic of debate. While some progress has been made, the larger question persists. Are we solving homelessness or simply managing it? The city's primary approach has centered around a housing-first model, which prioritizes placing individuals in permanent housing without preconditions. In theory, this model acknowledges that stable shelter is the first step toward stability in other areas, such as employment, health, and addiction recovery. In practice, however, housing supply remains limited. Affordable units are hard to find, and long waiting lists discourage even the most determined applicants. Moreover, although the city has partnered with nonprofit organizations to offer transitional housing and mental health services, these programs often rely on short-term grants or inconsistent funding. As a result, continuity is difficult to maintain. One month there may be resources available. The next month, the program could be scaled back or shut down entirely. Another challenge is coordination. Different departments, housing, health, policing, sanitation, often operate in silos, leading to duplication of efforts and miscommunication. In some cases, one agency may offer services while another plans a sweep in the same location. Without a unified citywide strategy, well-meaning initiatives can end up working against each other. Are we doing enough to connect people to support? Or are we just cycling them through broken systems? On a broader scale, New Orleans has also received funding through federal programs like HUD's emergency housing vouchers and Continuum of Care grants. These investments are important, but they are only part of the equation. Lasting impact requires political will, consistent public pressure, and a cultural shift in how we see housing not as a privilege, but as a basic right. If there's one lesson from the last decade, it's that temporary shelters and reactive policies are not enough. The homelessness issue here, as with many cities, is not just about visible poverty. It's about decades of economic neglect, policy inertia, and misaligned priorities. And as with so many aspects of homelessness in America, solutions exist, but commitment is everything. Personal reflection between understanding and accountability. When I think about the homelessness crisis in New Orleans, I find myself caught between two truths. On one hand, it's impossible not to feel sympathy for those living without shelter. No one chooses to sleep on concrete or line up for food unless life has stripped them of other choices. The stories I've heard of lost jobs, medical emergencies, abusive homes are real and heartbreaking. In that sense, the system has failed. Housing has become a luxury, and survival feels like a lottery. It's no wonder why so many now represent the growing face of homelessness in America. But at the same time, we can't ignore the complexity. Some individuals refuse help, not because they don't need it, but because they've been burned before. Some reject shelters due to strict curfews, shared spaces, or the trauma of past institutional settings. Others struggle with addiction or mental health challenges that make consistent support difficult. And yes, in a few cases, there is reluctance to re-enter structured living altogether. That doesn't make their pain any less valid, but it raises important questions. How much should society accommodate individual resistance? And where do we draw the line between empathy and enabling? Likewise, I believe local governments are trying, but often too late, too little, or too clumsily. The tent sweeps, for instance, might aim to protect public health or business interests, but they often feel like cosmetic cleanups. Displacing people without offering real alternatives only deepens distrust. At the same time, it's also unfair to expect city workers to fix decades of policy failure overnight. Should we blame the mayor's office or the federal government that allowed housing to crumble for generations? Ultimately, New Orleans shows us both the urgency and the limits of compassion. We need housing and services, yes, but also accountability from both the system and the individuals within it. The city can't thrive if it leaves part of its soul on the streets. Yet solving this isn't about choosing sides. It's about confronting reality with clarity and care, and admitting that homelessness in America is not someone else's story. Conclusion. The story of homelessness in New Orleans is not a local anomaly. It is a reflection of national neglect. It shows what happens when housing policy is reactive, when public health is underfunded, and when poverty is treated as invisible. At the same time, it reminds us that solutions do exist through housing-first models, coordinated services, and, above all, a shift in public will. But can we truly fix a system that allowed this crisis to grow for so long? Are we ready to treat housing as a human right, not a privilege? New Orleans may be famous for resilience, but resilience should not mean survival intents. It should mean dignity, access, and care for all. Until we see every unhoused person as part of our shared future, the crisis of homelessness in America will remain not just on our streets, but in our values.